We were fine, at least that's what I kept telling myself. Even when the silence between us began to stretch longer than our conversations. Even when her eyes, once so full of light and mischief, had dulled into something distant, reflective of a life lived alongside someone, not with them. We were married for 6 years. And for the longest time, that meant something, at least to me. Not fireworks, not poetry, but rhythm, predictability, a kind of silent comfort I mistook for security. Every morning followed the same pattern. I'd wake up first, make coffee, 2 mugs. One with a splash of oat milk. No sugar, hers. She never acknowledged it, never thanked me, but she drank it every morning. Routine. Then I'd head into the shower. And she'd be on her phone when I came out, scrolling through emails, school group chats, or perhaps something else. We rarely spoke in the mornings anymore. Just nods and glances, movements carefully choreographed like dancers who no longer look at each other but still hit their marks. Breakfast was functional. Toast, sometimes yogurt, occasionally, if we were feeling generous, eggs. Conversation was reduced to logistics. Did you remember to take the trash out? I'll be home late. Staff meeting. Did MIA finish her science project? It was the kind of life that looked fine from the outside. Even enviable. 2 working professionals. A tidy home. No loud arguments. No scandals. Stability. Right, but there was something in the way she said good night. Not unkind, but hollow, like someone completing a formality. Like an actor finishing a line they've memorized but no longer feel. And when I'd say it back, I wondered if she could tell I was mimicking the same tone. We were polite, always, even when we were miles apart inside our own heads. We didn't fight. That's what I used to tell my friends when they'd ask how married life was. We don't fight, I'd say, and they'd smile, as if that meant something. But I've come to learn, absence of conflict does not mean presence of love. I don't remember the last time she touched me without needing something. I don't remember the last time I looked at her and felt the urge to reach out. Just because. The physical space between us was filled with silent agreements, unspoken boundaries. I'd sit on one end of the couch, she'd sit on the other. We'd watch the same show but react to it differently, her with a distant smirk. Me with half-hearted laughter. Even the shows we once binged together became fragmented. She'd watch ahead, I'd fall behind, and we'd never catch up. Sometimes I wondered if she noticed the gap, the cooling, but she was always so composed, so measured, never the type to complain or confront. She handled everything with a kind of quiet grace that made it hard to accuse her of anything. Even neglect. If love is a fire, ours had become embers buried under routine and responsibility. There were moments, flickers, when I thought I could reach her. A weekend getaway suggestion, a joke I knew she once loved, a playlist from when we first met. But they landed flat. Her smiles didn't reach her eyes. Her laughter, if any, felt borrowed from a past self she no longer resembled. I told myself it was the stress. Teaching wasn't easy. COVID had left scars. Everyone was tired. Maybe it was just a phase. But deep down, I knew, there's a kind of intimacy that disappears not with a scream, but with a sigh, not with betrayal, but with indifference. And that's what scared me. Not that she didn't love me anymore, but that she might not even care enough to stop. We had become partners in a well-run company called marriage. We handled operations smoothly, bills paid on time, laundry folded, birthday parties organized. We presented well. Her colleagues liked me, mine respected her. Even our parents were proud. No one suspected that beneath that polished veneer was a chasm growing wider each day. We still said, "I love you," sometimes, especially on birthdays or anniversaries. But it felt like reciting a line in a play that had lost its meaning. A phrase passed between 2 actors afraid to break character. I remember one night, I stood in the kitchen watching her rinse dishes. The light hit her just right, soft, golden, and for a moment, I saw the woman I married. Not just saw, felt her. And I wanted to say something. Anything, something true, something raw, but all that came out was, "Did you get the email from the hoa?" And she replied, without looking up, "Yeah, I took care of it. We were fine." That's what I told myself as I climbed into bed every night. As I rolled to my side and felt the cold space behind me where she once curled into. As I heard her breathing steady and even. Already lost to sleep, or pretending. We were fine. Until the night I woke up and realized she wasn't sleeping beside me. Until the night I saw the light of her phone, illuminating a face I no longer recognized. Until the night when silence wasn't just absence of sound, but the sound of something breaking quietly. Irreversibly, forever. We were fine, but fine began to change when the nights stopped belonging to us. It didn't happen all at once. It never does. Like rust, it crept in slowly, unseen, unspoken. One night here, another there. At first, it was me staying up late for work. Deadlines, client meetings, late-night code deployments. She used to wait up. She used to fall asleep next to me on the couch, her head resting on my shoulder, murmuring half dreams I never quite understood but always cherished. That stopped. Instead, she'd go to bed alone. Then, weeks later, I noticed she wasn't going to bed early anymore either. I'd come out of my office to grab a drink, and there she was, on the balcony, wrapped in that gray cardigan she always wore when she needed to feel safe. Her phone glowing against the night. No music, no book, just her, the cold air, and that screen lighting up her face. The first few times I didn't say anything. Maybe she couldn't sleep. Maybe it was school stuff. Maybe, but it wasn't the sleeplessness that unsettled me. It was her expression. It wasn't blank, it was alive. Not just awake, but present. Her eyes would light up in that way I hadn't seen in years. Not since our first few months of dating, when every touch sparked like static. That spark, once mine, now glowed in the dark, and I was no longer its source. I watched her from the hallway once. I know how that sounds. It wasn't proud. It was desperate. She stood leaning on the balcony railing, smiling into her phone like it had whispered something that touched her deeply. Her fingers moved fast, typing, pausing, deleting, typing again, that strange combination of restraint and excitement. Her feet fidgeted, she bit her lip, and I felt something in my chest pull tight, a string being wound around something fragile. I didn't interrupt, I didn't call her name. I walked back to my office, shut the door, and stared at the same spreadsheet for 20 minutes without entering a single number. The next night, I couldn't sleep, not from caffeine, from ache, an ache that didn't come from jealousy, it came from knowing. Knowing that whatever that moment was, it no longer included me. That look in her eyes had been mine once. Now, I was just the man who made her coffee in the morning and paid the mortgage. A roommate with shared responsibilities, not a partner with shared dreams. It became a pattern. She'd say she was grading papers, but I'd hear the soft chime of her phone at 1 a.m. Then again at 2:15. Then again at 3:07. She always silenced notifications, but the screen flashes. You can't hide light in the dark. Not really. I started counting those flashes, like a prisoner counting seconds on the wall. 1, 2, 3. By the fifth one, I stopped pretending to be asleep. My body faced away, my heart faced her, but she never noticed. Or maybe she did. Maybe she chose not to. Maybe we both did. One night, she came back into the room after nearly an hour on the balcony. I kept my eyes closed, kept my breathing even. She slid under the covers gently. Too gently, the kind of gentle you use when you don't want to wake someone, or don't want to face them. She lay still. I could feel the heat of her body nearby, but it never reached me. Not really. I wanted to roll over, pull her into me, ask her, confront her, anything, but I didn't, because I was afraid I already knew. I was afraid of hearing the truth in her silence, of watching her try to lie, and failing, or worse, succeeding. I was afraid of confirming what my gut had already whispered, that there was someone else on the other side of that screen. Someone who got to see the fire in her eyes while I sat in the dark wondering when we'd stop being us. I began rehearsing conversations in my head. Lines I might say, soft, firm, casual, angry, But every version ended the same way, in silence. Her silence, my silence, the kind that fills a room and drowns every word before it can reach the air. There was a time I would have fought, yelled, demanded answers, but that time had long passed. Now, I clung to a single, fragile thread, the hope that maybe I was wrong, that maybe she just needed space. Maybe her insomnia was real. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe the smile wasn't for him. Maybe, but the worst kind of heartbreak is the kind you see coming slowly, and can't stop. The kind where you know, and keep knowing, and pretend not to know, because the knowing itself is too painful to accept. There's a peculiar kind of pain that comes with watching someone drift away in real time. She was still there, same laugh, same scent, same gestures, but none of it reached me, like watching a hologram of the woman I loved go through motions on a loop, while the real her lived somewhere just out of reach, behind a screen, behind a wall I didn't know how to climb. One night, I caught myself whispering her name as she walked past me to the bathroom. She paused, turned her head slightly. She said, distracted. Nothing, I mumbled. Just, good night. She smiled gently, good night, and shut the door behind her. I stood in that hallway, alone with my thoughts, with the knowledge that I wasn't just losing her. I was losing the version of myself who believed she still belonged to me. I didn't want to become the jealous husband, the interrogator, the accuser. I wanted to be the man she could still come back to. The safe place, the steady hand. But I was beginning to suspect she no longer needed that, no longer needed me, so I did nothing, said nothing, and every night, the silence between us grew louder. Every night, the glow of her screen lit the room like a quiet betrayal. Every night, I stayed awake longer, working later, drinking more coffee, listening harder, not because I wanted to catch her, but because I wanted to catch that look in her eyes one more time. The one that used to be mine. And wasn't anymore. It was 3:04 a.m. I remember the time precisely because I had just checked the clock on my phone. Not long after I slid under the covers, pretending to sleep. The room was dim, bathed only in the faint silver cast of the street lamp that filtered through the curtains. The kind of silence that held its breath, fragile, still, and waiting. She sat up in bed beside me, not abruptly, not suspiciously, just slowly, deliberately, the way you do when something's been keeping you awake for hours and you've finally given up on the idea of rest. I didn't move. I let my breathing remain slow, steady, rhythmic, the illusion of sleep woven tight over my tension. Her phone screen lit up, washing her face in that cold, unnatural glow. Her features, sharp and angular in the darkness, were suddenly softened, illuminated by that artificial warmth. And then, she smiled, a small, private curve of the lips. Not the kind you give a spouse out of courtesy. Not the distracted smile of politeness. This one was different. It came from somewhere deep and warm and alive. And I knew, there's something devastating about seeing the person you love smile in a way they no longer do for you. It's like watching your favorite song being sung for someone else. I kept my eyes shut, though everything in me strained toward her. Her breathing was calm, her movements precise. She wasn't frantic or flustered. There was a quiet confidence to the way she tapped on her phone. Her fingers moving like they were familiar with this space, this rhythm, typing, pausing, reading, typing again. I wanted to believe she was talking to a friend, a sister, even her mother, but no one sends messages like that at 3 a.m. with a smile like that unless they're being seen, not just responded to. Seen, cherished, desired. And then she wrote it. I didn't need to peek. I could read the sentence as it lit up the reflection in the mirror across the room. Her phone angled just right. Or maybe just wrong enough. My eyes barely cracked open. Just enough to see. I still remember that night. What you did to me has never left my body. The words didn't scream. They didn't stab. They slid in like a whisper-shaped blade. Clean, precise, irrefutable. I didn't flinch. I didn't gasp. I didn't sit up and confront her. I just watched her hit send. The moment she did, she let out the softest exhale. like she'd been holding her breath the whole time, as if releasing that sentence had unburdened her, maybe even thrilled her. I watched her eyes linger on the screen, waiting for the reply, and when it didn't come right away, she locked the phone and set it gently down on the nightstand. She leaned back, pulled the blanket over her shoulders, and turned away from me, curling into the same body that used to belong to us. And I lay there, eyes open now, staring at the ceiling. The silence wasn't just absence anymore. It was a presence, a third entity in the room, heavier than either of us. I felt it sit on my chest, fill the space between us, draw lines where once there had been none. I could have said something, her name, a question, a scream, anything, but instead, I reached for the quietest part of myself, the one that had always feared this moment and yet had rehearsed it night after night. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, slowly, no sudden movements, just a man going to get water, just a man leaving the room he no longer recognized as his own. I stood up. She didn't stir, she didn't look up, she didn't need to. Maybe she was asleep, maybe she was pretending, or maybe she knew I had seen everything and had chosen, already, not to explain. That was the worst part. Not the betrayal itself, but the fact that she hadn't hidden it with the desperation of someone who feared being caught. She had written that message knowing I was right there, 3 feet away, breathing, and still, she had sent it. That told me everything I needed to know. In the kitchen, I didn't turn on the light. I didn't want clarity, I didn't want exposure, I wanted shadow. I wanted a place where the edges blurred and the truth couldn't find me. I poured water I didn't drink, opened the fridge, closed it, stared at the blank microwave display like it might offer direction. Eventually, I returned to the room, not to sleep, to dress, slowly, methodically, the way you do when you're packing for a place you don't know if you'll return from. I didn't slam drawers, I didn't fumble, I moved like a ghost who already knew his way around the house he no longer belonged to. I left the ring, not dramatically on the pillow, not symbolically in the sink, just quietly, beside her phone, where she could see it in the morning and understand that something had ended. I walked out without a note. Because what could I write that she hadn't already erased? And as I pulled the door closed behind me, I realized the true cost of a single sentence sent at 3:04 a.m. It wasn't the end of love. It was the end of the story where I believed she still respected the man sleeping beside her. It was one sentence, but it cut like memory, and it would bleed for years. I didn't cry, I didn't call anyone, I just drove, and somewhere between the silence of the road and the rhythm of the tires, I understood something. When love dies, it rarely explodes. It slips out the door at night and never comes back. That night, I watched it leave, and I didn't stop it. The floor was colder than I remembered. Maybe it was the hour, 4:16 a.m. by the dim numbers blinking on the microwave. Blinking as if in rhythm with my breath. Or maybe my disbelief. I stood barefoot in the kitchen. The silence around me thick as steam rising from the kettle. The coffee machine clicked into life, and I clung to that mechanical whirring sound like it was the only thing still following a script in this house. I didn't look back toward the hallway. I didn't want to hear the creak of the mattress if she stirred. I didn't want to catch her silhouette leaning on the doorway, offering some half-formed excuse. Or worse, nothing at all. I didn't want her words. I didn't want her voice, because I knew that anything she might say would be too late. Or too rehearsed. Or worse, genuinely unsure of what she'd done wrong. The drip of the coffee hitting the pot filled the room with an unbearable clarity. I wasn't even thirsty, I wasn't trying to stay awake. It was just something to do with my hands while everything else inside me trembled. When the pot was full, I poured exactly 1 cup. Her cup, the white ceramic one with the tiny chip on the handle. The one she used every morning but never really noticed I refilled before she came downstairs. I set it on the dining table. No cream, no sugar, just like she liked it. Just like I always did. And beside it, I placed my ring. I didn't say goodbye. There was nothing left to say. I didn't need to leave a note. Not because I wanted her to suffer in confusion, but because I knew she wouldn't be confused. Maybe she'd be startled, maybe not. But she'd know. She would see the cup. She would see the ring. And she would understand. She would understand that I had seen everything. That I had heard the silence louder than any confession. That I had chosen to walk away not because I didn't love her, but because she had decided. In that moment of 3:04 a.m. vulnerability, to believe I was no longer worth hiding from. When someone betrays you and tries to hide it, there's a terrible rage that comes. But when they betray you and simply don't care whether you see, that's a grief no anger can touch. I took my coat from the hook by the door. I didn't check the weather. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't know where I was going. Maybe to a hotel, maybe to the office, maybe just to drive until the sun came up. But I knew one thing. I would not go back to that bed. Not that day, not the next, not ever, if I could help it. The hallway was dark, but I didn't need light. I could walk this path blindfolded. I had walked it for years. After all, first with excitement, then routine, and lately, resentment. Step by step, each floorboard I avoided creaking. Each corner I turned with the muscle memory of a man who had built a life here. A quiet, careful life, one that now ended not with a bang, not with a fight, but with a soft click of a door unlocking. As I opened it, I realized I didn't hate her. That's the part that hurt most. Hate would have given me fuel. Hate would have burned clean. But what I felt was something harder to hold. Disappointment, sadness, an aching clarity that I had not been chosen. Not that night, maybe not for years. I stepped out into the cool pre-dawn air. The street was empty, still wet from a late-night drizzle. The world looked unchanged, and yet I felt like I had shed skin. Like I was walking out not just of a home, but out of a version of myself I could no longer carry. I didn't check my phone. I knew she hadn't messaged. And I knew she wouldn't. Not yet. She'd wake up. She'd reach for her phone. Check for replies. Maybe he had answered. Maybe he hadn't. Then, eventually, she'd look to her side. And find the bed empty. The ring gone. The coffee cooling beside her phone. That was all I would leave her. A cup of warmth she no longer earned. And a silence she had created. I didn't leave to punish her. I left to protect the part of myself that still believed in dignity. That still believed love should feel like refuge. Not like waiting for someone to remember you exist. I didn't need to hear her apologize. Because she didn't send that message by accident. She sent it thinking I wouldn't see it. That I was asleep. That I no longer mattered as a witness. And that's what cut deepest. Not the message. Not the memory she had with someone else. But that she had already begun to erase me from the room. And so, I left. At 4:20 a.m., I closed the door quietly behind me. And just like that, I stopped being her husband. Not because of a fight, but because I refused to stay where I was invisible. The coffee would be cold by the time she found it. But the silence beside it would still be warm, heavy, absolute. And in that silence, she would find every answer I didn't need to give. She woke slowly, as she always did on Sundays. For a few blessed seconds. The warmth of the blanket wrapped around her and the faint hum of the refrigerator downstairs lulled her into thinking everything was as it should be. She turned, instinctively reaching to her side, expecting the comforting weight of her husband's body, or at least the presence of his absence. But there was nothing, no indentation on the mattress. No rustling of morning breath or familiar scent lingering on the pillow. Just air, still, cold, final. She blinked. The light in the room was different. Harder, clearer, like it was no longer filtering through the soft haze of yesterday. And then she saw it. The ring, placed so neatly beside her phone. Her cup of coffee, still steaming. The scent rising as if daring her to inhale what he left behind. Her heart didn't race. It cracked, slowly, methodically, like ice breaking beneath the surface of something deceptively calm. She didn't need a note. She didn't need a confrontation. This was louder, more deliberate. He had seen, he had known, and he had left with a grace that was more damning than any shouted curse. She picked up the ring with trembling fingers. Not because she thought she could undo what had happened, but because she needed to feel its weight. To remember that it had once been placed on her hand with a promise. And now, it sat in her palm as proof that she had broken something, not with fury, but with neglect. The silence in the room pressed against her chest. She didn't cry right away. There's a strange numbness that settles when your worst mistake has finally grown teeth and come back for you. It doesn't hurt like a stab. It's slower, deeper, like drowning in water you poured yourself. She opened her phone, not to message him, but out of some twisted, instinctive ritual. She looked at the chat history with the man she had texted the night before. The man from the past. The echo. The maybe. There was no reply. Just her last message. I still remember that night. What you did to me has never left my body. Now, reading it again under the cold judgment of daylight, it felt pitiful, juvenile, like someone throwing a match into a forest because they were cold, and only realizing they'd started a wildfire too late. She hadn't meant to leave. She hadn't planned to cheat. She hadn't even touched the other man. It was just words, just emotion, just longing. But she knew, now, that longing was enough to kill what they had. Her husband wasn't a dramatic man. He wasn't cruel. That's what made this worse. He had always been the one to stay. Even when she pulled away. Even when she didn't return affection. Even when she forgot how to be soft. She had taken his steadiness for granted. Thought she could disappear a little at a time and he'd always reach farther. That he'd always be the one to bridge the gap. But he didn't scream. He didn't accuse. He just left. And in that, he finally let her feel what it meant to be abandoned. She sat at the edge of the bed and sipped the coffee. It burned, not the temperature, but the knowing, the intimacy in the gesture. He had still made her coffee. Even in leaving, he thought about her ritual, her comfort, her need, and she had thought he was no longer watching, no longer listening, no longer present, but he had been. Until he chose not to be. The ache in her chest was not about the loss of a marriage contract. It wasn't even about guilt in the traditional sense. It was about shame, a deeper kind, the shame of having someone choose you again and again, and responding with silence. With absence, with secret longing for someone who hadn't even bothered to reply. She didn't love the other man. Not anymore, not really, but the moment he reached out, he had reminded her of something she thought she'd lost in herself, the ability to be wanted. To be seen in a way that didn't involve laundry, or errands, or sighs over dinner. She wasn't a cheater. She didn't recognize herself as that. She hadn't planned anything. It had all felt so small, so harmless, until it wasn't, until it was enough to make the man she thought would always stay, leave without asking for an explanation. She opened the curtains and watched the sunrise. It looked no different than any other morning, which made it crueler somehow. Shouldn't the sky shift when your world tilts off its axis? She set the ring back on the table, not out of rejection, but reverence, like placing a relic back where it belonged. She would not wear it. Not now, maybe not ever, but she would not hide from it either. She walked into the bathroom, saw herself in the mirror, and didn't recognize the woman staring back. Not because of age, not because of regret, but because for the first time in years, she saw her own hollowness. It was not the betrayal that undid her. It was realizing she had been unloving, unseeing, and that it had taken his absence to make her see the room she had emptied. One act of neglect at a time. She sat down, and she cried, not for losing him, but for finally realizing she had once been loved so well, and had watched it fade without lifting a hand to stop it. She wasn't sure if he'd ever come back. But if he did, she knew she wouldn't ask for forgiveness. She would ask if he had ever felt loved. And if he said no, she would finally understand the weight of the silence she had created. And carry it, for the rest of her life. She wrote the message twice. The first time, it spilled out fast, raw, disjointed, too many emotions fighting for space. Like water bursting from a pipe long left under pressure. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, skipping punctuation, ignoring grammar, as if rushing to reach him before the shame could catch up. But halfway through, she stopped, read it back, deleted every word. She started again, this time slower, thoughtfully, line by line. Subject line, I'm not asking you to reply. Body, I didn't mean for it to go this far. I didn't plan to lose you. I didn't think one message could mean the end of something we had spent years building. But I also know I don't deserve a reply. I know you saw the message. I know you understood what it meant. More than I did when I wrote it. I just wanted to be remembered. Wanted to feel like a woman again. Not a function. Not a name on a calendar. Not the keeper of routines. Just a woman. Seen. Desired. Noticed. And I know that sounds pathetic. But that's where I was. At 3:04 in the morning. Lonely. Small. Desperate in a way I didn't recognize until it was too late. You didn't yell. You didn't accuse. You didn't even wake me. You just left. Quietly. Kindly. Painfully. And I hate that it took your absence for me to finally feel the weight of my choices. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I wouldn't know what to do with it. I just needed you to know. I never stopped needing you. I just forgot how to show it. She stared at the blinking cursor for a long time. Her finger hovered over the send button. And then she clicked save to drafts. Some things, she realized, weren't meant to be sent. She closed the laptop, exhaled, and leaned back in the chair. The apartment was quiet, still. She could hear the ticking of the clock on the wall, the faint hum of the refrigerator, the muffled footsteps of someone walking a dog outside. Everything normal, everything unchanged, except her. Somewhere out there, he was awake, maybe sipping coffee in a small town miles away, maybe sitting by a lake, watching the water try to forget what the sky looked like, maybe reading, or maybe doing nothing. He didn't have social media. No Instagram, no Facebook, no email beyond a work address. He had always hated digital noise. He said it blurred the line between what mattered and what begged for attention. Now, she understood what he meant. She would never see his online status again. In the days after he left, she found herself walking quieter, speaking softer, as if she was still trying not to wake him in the next room. As if some part of her still hoped he might walk back in and ask gently, why, but he didn't, and he wouldn't. He had been leaving for a long time. She just hadn't looked closely enough to see the packed bags behind his eyes. Across the city, in a cabin he rented by a lake where cell service flickered and the air smelled like pine and wood smoke. He wrote in a journal he hadn't touched in years. Some betrayals don't come with kisses or lies. Some come dressed as silence, as distance, as unanswered needs that hollow you out one day at a time. The worst part wasn't the message. Not even what it said. The worst part was realizing she thought I wouldn't see it. That I had become so invisible to her. She no longer worried about being caught. She didn't lie. She just stopped trying to be truthful. And sometimes, what breaks a man is not the knife. It's realizing the person holding it thought he wouldn't feel it. He closed the journal and poured another cup of coffee. He didn't hate her, but he had nothing left to say. In her absence, he had found something quieter than heartbreak. Peace. And in her silence, she had discovered something louder than guilt. Loss. Sometimes the most powerful goodbye is the one that doesn't need to be sent. Not because it wouldn't matter, but because it already did. And long before the words were typed, the goodbye had already begun. Betrayal, he had once written, doesn't always happen when someone chooses someone else. It happens the moment they believe you wouldn't notice. And in that moment, he had stopped being hers. Not with a fight, but with a quiet she would never be able to fill.